abbreviated agenda this evening. Welcome back, those of you who are here. We may have gotten a little bit lazy, spoiled because of the hiatus, but we are back in full shape. I will say not everybody, we don't have to be in a meeting to be working. And pretty much all of us who are here have been working throughout the summer in some shape or form. Tonight's meeting is the only item really is to discuss the budget priorities for our district needs statement. I'm going to assume that Ira and Bev have gotten all the background information that was sent. Is that correct, Ira?
I'm going to shake my head and say I don't think I saw it.
Okay, well then you're just going to have to wing it and nod your head whenever we give you the signal. Okay?
You've also seen, Ira, you also remember when you and I spoke, you
Okay,
saw.
this is not the information that was sent today.
Yeah.
No.
Or yesterday. Okay.
Well, yesterday, Tuesday. But what you're gonna see, and I'll share my screen tonight, is not tremendously different than the list you and I spoke about a few weeks ago. So
I remember that. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
You shouldn't be lost in the wilderness. Let's put it that way.
I won't be. You
Why
can see my picture. I'm in a playground.
Lost in the snow.
Yes.
I think a number of you have kids who started school this week. Today, maybe?
Last week we were getting our school supplies together. We are getting our.
Well, when did the kids get to school?
Last week.
We trust that they're going when we send them.
All right. Okay. Why don't we get started? I would say the background material that leads to the budget priorities were prepared essentially by Courtney and myself. And in doing so, we want to assure you that we spoke with a number of the principals involved and the stakeholders involved in these various organizations. That's just to let you know that we have been working. But I would say we did spend a good bit of time speaking with various people. And you have the background, which would give you the information by and large leading to the budget priorities. So, Courtney, since this is your colorful sheet of, of priorities, why don't you start?
Sounds good. All right.
So what we're capital budget. Okay.
Yes. So what we're going to do tonight is similar to what we did last year, go through the budget priorities. Fundamentally, I know Bev and Roberta have got our working draft in, and what we're looking for here is kind of just that last take through for any language tweaks that people want, and to get a sense of where people want these ordered. Understanding that when we go to full board, there will be the usual exciting experience of a group trying to order a ginormous list of priorities. We wanted to make sure that we had a sense of where this committee felt things should be ordered. Yeah, Roberta.
So we have, Beverly and I have changed some of the language into English that non-education, non-library people can understand. So the language may not be exactly what you have tonight.
Okay.
But it will be in the DNS what your language is. But for the steering and the board.
But with this, is that the budget priorities too? Or
Yeah,
just the DNS?
For the budget for the DNS, we'll put your language. So,
okay.
But for the steering and for the full board, we're trying to keep it in language that who's not familiar with this will understand.
Got it. All right. So then fundamentally what we're going to do then is just agree kind of where we think the ordering should be. And again, I know Roberta and Bev, you have a draft order, but in case, you know, the order that we kind of have things in, I think it would be helpful to understand where the committee kind of is seeing things fall out. Since this committee had a hard time and it's almost impossible to do our YEL one in June. It's libraries didn't even get Blanche the thing until what, 2 weeks ago, Blanche?
If that long ago, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm gonna share.
I just want to, before we discuss ordering these, there's, you know, I'm reading this on another screen, and there's one that just hits me as rather alarming at the moment.
Okay.
Which I wish we could rephrase in some way, which is the one about children residing in NYCHA and homeless facilities. As you know, we have at least one facility right now in our district that is being used to house children that are being displaced by certain Southern governors who are acting in bad faith, to say the most favorable thing we can say about them. And this is above and beyond our normal situation or normal responsibilities. And I think we need to include that in something that may well be developing.
You're talking about in
as
the
we speak.
You're talking
What?
about in the DNS portion?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have a line here, the second paragraph,
Yeah.
the third paragraph under schools. And I would just like to say that this is a need that will be developing and may continue to develop in the future. And it is developing in our district. And I'd like to find some language that allows us to adjust, because by the time we get this to the board, it may well be outdated. And I trust everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Ira, what is the facility?
They're right now, they're using facilities all through the city. They're using one facility on Central Park West.
Right. We have one up in, I think the kids are at PS 145. If I'm
Right,
not
which is
mistaken.
the usual, but
Yeah.
if the Southern governors can continue this,
Yep.
we're just simply not,
Yeah,
we're not able to.
resources will be needed. I think they are asking for federal funds
Well,
for
the
that, but
mayor-
I agree. Bev, your hand up.
Sorry, I'm just very quickly. Who knows what's going to happen in November?
Right.
And if November doesn't follow a certain path, federal funds may not be available. I'm just pointing out the obvious.
So Ira, are you suggesting that we add something not only in the district needs statement where that's very simple,
Something that's cautionary.
as an item on the budget request as well?
The budget request may need to change at a future date, depending on what happens.
This is going to be our opportunity. So it seems to me, I mean, I heard on the news today that Florida is now, begun sending folks up to all places.
Martha's Vineyard,
Martha's
DC.
Vineyard.
I'd go there.
And I just think this is something that if we know it's going to be an issue, maybe we need to catch it now and put it in the budget.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
I just don't know the exact wording of it.
We'll come up with something, but that would be an expense budget need.
Yeah.
This is purely capital.
Oh. I don't think it would be.
Oh, you're saying, well, for facilities, it would maybe be probably.
Would be expense.
It would be probably expense because it would be a rental of a hotel or something.
No, I'm saying, but they're coming into our schools.
No, I think he's
For the
talking about,
schools.
so for example, they need translators, they need.
No, that's that's expense. I understand that.
Right,
I'm talking about that the kids are going into the schools.
right, but we have,
that-
but don't we have, I mean, our enrollment is down.
Our enrollment is down, our teachers are down. We don't have teachers.
I know, but that's
Expense.
expense.
That's expense.
That's expense.
Okay, so this is purely capital. That was my question.
Expense.
Expense. It's expense.
No, are we is the district needs purely capital for this
Oh,
meeting?
No. Now, let me just explain. So there are two things that we're doing. We have our budget priorities, which are not necessarily district needs. I mean, there are district needs, but we have district needs that are not necessarily budget priorities. So some of our needs are expense, some of our budget needs are capital, and then
Okay.
some needs are just district needs.
So my way of thinking about it, Ira, has always been, since I struggled with this last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember when it was like, for example, in our district needs, it talks about the fact that one of the big issues in our district is we have these pockets of areas within the same zip code that have at either end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And yet, for a lot of the youth services, they go by average or median, whatever it is, household income for a zip code. And so, for example, sometimes the funding doesn't really reflect the need in our district. That's a district need, is for that algorithm, that metric, to be the means by which they determine that, to be adjusted, because we struggle with that in our district. Capital need is like Bloomingdale Library.
I'm very well aware that I deal with capital budget every day of my life.
So this is an expense need, because it would be teachers, bilingual teachers, translators, all kind of the services.
Right. So this is an appropriate. Then you're saying it's appropriate to discuss that here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I was sort of hearing that it wasn't, and I was going like, I just wanted to make sure I was at the right meeting.
Need. Just that it's not a capital need. If we're going to do capital needs, I think that goes into HHS.
That has no cap. This is not a capital need, because, like you said, we have capacity right now.
Correct. I think it's an expense, and I think language can go into the DNS and into the budget priorities as well to reflect this, because I think it's a good point.
It's just contingency, but I don't want to be here a year and a half later if these Looney Tunes keep up what they're doing. Sorry for the editorial comment.
Well, they will unless they're stopped, but okay.
Okay. All right. Hang on. Okay. All right. So I think probably the thing that makes the most sense then is I'm going to share my screen with my multicolored coded budget that you all hate.
Barely visible.
So sorry. Was trying to make it easier, probably made it harder. Where am I here? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna make the font big so that it's easier to see. How about that?
Rev Roberta, question. Are we talking about 20, the number 20? Priorities or what?
Well, it's not, you don't get 20.
No, I know that.
So
What's
if it's 1 or 2 over, it's 1 or 2 over, it's 1 or 2 under, it's 1 or 2 under. Where it's not an exact science.
Okay.
So the way this works is the things that are numbered were things that were on our list last year.
Right.
The things that are in red are things that in discussions leading up to this, we think are no longer relevant, or in our conversations did not hear this year that we heard last year. The things that are in the horrible yellow or orange, my apologies that people couldn't see, are the things that were in last year, in which let's discuss this tonight because I think we didn't hear it and I think perhaps can go away. The things that are in green are new. Okay. So number 5, and this was where it ultimately ended up on CB7's budget priorities last year, was upgrading school facilities to support new COVID protocols. The sentiment on this was that it could go away because we're likely there. We've done the ventilation work and things like that, plus all the other elements that are COVID related.
Plus, the city is getting out of that business anyway.
This is also true. Number 9 on our list last year was about Bloomingdale Library, the reconstruction piece of it. This library basement, as you know from our previous meetings, has real potential for use, especially by the youth potentially in the neighborhood. Not only was that need already outstanding, but they had flooding, as you may recall, a couple of months ago, and that need still exists.
And we put that, right now it's number 4 on our master list.
Number
Okay.
what? 4?
Or on our master list.
Oh, good.
That's great.
That's great.
So,
So you understand, we're trying to balance the needs of 5 or 6 different committees plus, so we're trying not to lump everything together, but
You mean it's not all about us, Roberta?
so
Eventually. Okay.
Number
Courtney?
11. Mhm.
Hang on, are we still discussing 9? Because I have
No.
a question.
Oh, sure, go for it.
Just because, so this need still exists about the basement specifically, because then further down I see a new one, which is more stuff for Bloomingdale Library about their second floor.
the 2 have been merged on our master document.
Perfect.
Okay. And
So
but that basement need still exists?
It's still at this, we've kept it as, we've merged it, so they're both in the same,
Perfect.
they're both number 4.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
That makes sense.
But yes, Kristen, to your question, it still exists because it existed before. It hadn't gotten handled and it got flooded. So now we've got that.
Okay.
Courtney, do I recall getting something that suggested that the library did not wish to prioritize the basement? I seem to
you-
remember something.
I can speak to that. What the library told me, they have never been over anxious to do it as a whole. The librarian on site is hesitant to push the case. The people downtown told me last week that it's being used as the hub, to quote, for several libraries, not just our 3 or 4, but several libraries uptown for storage. One case that was given to me, for example, when we need to cut plexiglass, this space is the only space that can hold the cutting machine for the plexiglass. This is not a community service as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Mark has raised his hand too, but
Okay, Mark.
I have some comments.
Just to amplify on that, using this space to cut plexiglass is just about as stupid as using it to house paper copies of the New York Times that are available online, which is the prior use of this space. Anyway, this is
Here, this is just.
This
Here,
is
this
an
is just.
example. Let me just get through this. This is an example of where it's appropriate for a community board to push back against an agency that seems recalcitrant on a very good idea. And this is our job to do this, I believe, because we need to push this case. Nobody else is pushing it. The elected officials are not, and the library system is not. And yet this is a very real need that can be addressed by very valuable space. And so we need to be the voice that no one else is espousing to bring this forward. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to second what Mark was saying. This is painful to hear this kind of logic. You don't use space in a prime residential area to cut plexiglass to store books. If you need a central book depository, look at a warehouse district. Plexiglass, call somebody and have them send it over.
Sure.
We're not in the plexiglass business. We're in the library business, right?
And I use their words. The
it's
words
just-
were a quote.
Okay.
It
And
is
this- And there are bathrooms and an elevator.
Are you asking? Yes, there are.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
It's great space.
Um,
Can
so
we-
so the next one, which was 11 last year.
Faint 11, okay.
I know, the hard to read 11. Provide funding for district schools selected as new U3K and UPK sites to ensure their facilities. So last year, what we've been told is as they were rolling out this program, that there were sites within our district that, for example, needed to be transformed for the super littles. So, you know, like little toilets in the bathrooms and sinks that little hands could reach and things like that. I did my best to get an answer as to whether or not this was still a need. I did not get an answer. So I can only say that it's not something that we heard about when we had former superintendent Christine Laughlin on. She had been the one who had mentioned it the year before. She did not mention it as a priority this year. And so I put it in our horrible yellow orange color. And I think it's up for discussion whether this should be on the list or ranked highly, because we did not hear it. It doesn't mean it's not true. I just couldn't get confirmation and didn't hear it in our conversations as part of these committee meetings.
As somebody who's designed a lot of educational facilities over the years, there are two schools of thought on this. And one school of thought says children don't have small toilets and small sinks at home, and they should learn how to use full-sized facilities. Then there's also the educator side. And then there's the other side, which is what do we do when enrollment of first and second grade and third grade recovers?
Yeah.
Then we have facilities that have toilets where they aren't as needed in as great a quantity, and we've lost the space in the classrooms to these smaller facilities. So this is a problem. So I'm not convinced that this is a high priority. That's my 2 cents as somebody who's designed
Mark?
more than enough.
Mark and then Kristen.
So Ira makes a good point. My thought about it is that the difference, this is a question of whether we should put aside money for this purpose, not to decide what it is that they should build with it. So if there's a need for this, then we should fund it and leave it to the experts like Ira to figure out exactly what it is that we should use that money to build. My only other thought on this is that there are schools that are under-enrolled because there's enrollment down. And then there are schools in District 3 that are under-enrolled because they've lost their pre-K or UPK slots. And that is a great feeder for kindergarten enrollment and enrollment for the rest of the school. And the efforts to close some of our district schools are directly related to that. So it would be even better to call for this funding and then to ask that it be directed at the schools that are least enrolled or most under-enrolled, or whatever the right term is.
Kristen?
Yeah, I'll jump off from Mark because that makes sense. The problem for this document is we don't know where it stands and what the need is. I definitely hear you on that. So what it was a year ago, which could be different, is that for the DOE to approve putting in a 3K or a new UPK, they would look at a school building and require that they had these facilities. So some of our under-enrolled schools didn't have appropriate facilities, and DOE would pass on that building and find another one. So getting the built infrastructure in to the schools that are currently under enrolled would help them. However, we don't know if they actually went ahead and put some of this in someplace.
Yeah.
And Kirsten, can I ask you a question? So if we ask for this, does that mean they'll do it? For example, if PSX is under enrolled, and will they actually put this?
I like you say with the district needs statement, it generally works better if it's more specific, right? So if you had this specificity of PSX, right? If you had that X, that might help the argument. Sorry.
Which we don't.
So, we could not put this in the capital and just put it in the district needs. And then find out more information and keep advocating for it. Even though it's not in the capital budget priorities, it doesn't mean we can't advocate.
Well, right. And once it's in the DNS portion, then we can advocate for it all year if the need comes up. Like once this passes with it language in, if it becomes an issue, we have the ability to speak to it. Bev and then Kristen, it looks like your hand is it back up? Okay.
Oh. Yeah, I find the connection to the under enrolled schools a very persuasive one, and think that that's the way we should go. Perhaps only in the DNS for now. I would agree with that. I think in part we've got a relatively new superintendent in CSD3 who may not be on top of all of these issues and is also building up his staff. So I think this is a tough time to try to get things that are really specific like this kind of nailed. But I think the DNS would allow us the ability to continue to work on the issue.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Ira?
I have one question for Kristen, which she would be able to answer. Maybe she doesn't know the answer to this. But in the last rezoning of the district, there were, I recall, one school that had a number of classrooms that were targeted at the younger grades in the future, or was that just because in the rezoning, the school didn't have students yet within the zone?
When 452 moved buildings?
Well, I remember there was a surplus of classrooms, at least in the immediate short term in 84, for example. In the thought
that has filled with UPK.
Then it did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, it has a lot of UPK in it.
Okay, and have they done this? Have they made these changes at 84?
I don't know the details of like the physical plant, but because they put so many in, I'm going to assume that they did do that.
It's a good question if anybody has a route into 84. Just posing the question. Okay, my memory's not as bad as I thought. Okay.
Okay, so this is excellent. We'll move that language to the DNS and see what comes of it. Number 16 last year was the handicap accessible piece. I pulled the most updated accessibility list this year. And last year it was one additional elementary school. Now we're at one elementary school. So we had, that's what we're looking at. So my argument would be to take out this and just leave in one elementary school.
What we did was handicap accessible school obtained 2024 capital plan funding for one additional elementary school and one additional middle school.
I don't think we need the middle school though. I think we hit that number now.
Really? Then
I'll double check it, but Kristen and I went through, right? Kristen, you and I went through that document. And I think it was just one elementary school.
All right,
For accessibility?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't recall it exactly. I can only think of 2 offhand.
Well, hang on one second. Hang on, here we go. Sorry, my computer is acting up. Where's this? Sorry. All right.
You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow to let us know.
Okay. All right. Can people see this?
See what?
No.
What are we looking for?
All right. Hang on. Let me stop sharing and then try again. I'm pulling up the. Sorry. Hang on. Sorry.
I want you to know I gave up a party to come to the meeting.
Do appreciate that. Why is it? Oh, there we go. All right. So this is the updated. This is hiding it. So I think on middle school, well, if you guys trust me, I won't belabor this point while we're on this call, but I think it's only one elementary school, but I'll double check and I'll send through a version that has the full list for Berta.
Let's say we'll trust you, okay?
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let's try
So
this.
any further? We put in the fire alarm system for the Performing Arts Library. I don't know if that,
Where are we? We're at 16?
okay, the
Hang on.
handicapable school is now at 16.
Hang on 1 second. We're still at upgrade school facilities.
Upgrade school facilities to improve school security, utilizing technology such as doors, locks, cameras, and buzzer systems. This is a hot topic right now. I will tell you, CEC3 is having a lot of discussion about this, including at their next meeting. Parents in our district have been actually kind of pushing the questions on this. And I see Marquez's hands. He's been sitting on some of these calls, and I know he's kind of talking about this. So Mark, do you want to talk about this? I'm happy to chime on this one if you want.
No, you go ahead and frame it. Well, let me just frame it this way. There is a concern that this is a solution in search of a problem. That folks who are speaking out about the safety of our schools are doing so without having investigated what already exists in terms of safety protocols, as well as safety infrastructure, and without having examined why it is, for example, that front doors of school buildings are not locked. It has everything to do with the fire departments, as I understand it. And it is correct that you wrote in the DNS that private schools have a different approach to this because they have different reliable staffing options than public schools do. I think this is at most an expense priority for a study of these concerns rather than an outright call for building infrastructure that we haven't yet determined is actually needed.
My question, Courtney, is this something that will make parents more comfortable? Because if it's going to make them more comfortable, then we can leave it in. I mean, this is something, sometimes our budget priorities are psychological more than physical.
Well, I have a thought on that, but let's go to Kristen and Ira first, and then I will.
Hey, yes, sadly, every round of school shootings has the same response, right? That emotionally we think harden the buildings. So I've been through this with 2 other like mass events that were terrible. And both times the DOE did have very legitimate explanations as to why they don't really like to harden the buildings and why there are other options. So since we, as a community board, don't know exactly what they should put in, right? Is it a camera? Is it an alarm? Maybe Mark's solution of putting it in the expenses is a little broader and could be a little more inclusive, so parents know we're concerned about it, we're looking at it, but we are not empowered to offer the solution, and put it in that study category.
Ira, and then I
Oh,
and then
okay,
I'll
I'm gonna,
chat.
okay, having some exposure to these kind of issues on this type of facility and other facilities, I think Mark is right in a degree that if you're going to put these kind of mechanical measures in, you then have to have the staff to actually respond. In most schools, that level of staff does not exist. If you put cameras in, you actually have to have people to monitor the cameras. You need a place for them to monitor. And some schools do have these spaces. Some of the large high schools do have these facilities. But once again, you need people to monitor. Your typical elementary school has 1 or 2 people there from school safety. A few years back, there was an issue of an autistic child wandering out of a school. And the DOE responded by putting what we call DTEX alarms on the door, so that an alarm does go off if one of the doors is open from the inside. Once again, that's a problem of staffing on one part, and it's a part of building a resilient system that the DOE did not do. The resilient systems are expensive, and a proper system is tied back to the fire alarm system, which raises other issues. So I think that it's a far bigger issue than dedicating $50, $100, $150,000 worth of hardware to a school. I think it might be an issue for a resolution calling on the DOE to look at their standards in light of current and possible future events. This has been an issue ongoing since the early 90s. And there are books and seminars and so forth. And I won't go through all the stuff going on, but a lot of it's relatively ineffective if you don't support it. I think that this school shooting in Texas is an example of, you had lots of people there who were capable and nobody did anything. So it's perhaps more perceptual than anything too. So I don't know what to do. I think maybe a well-phrased resolution on a study that addresses this on a system-wide basis.
All right. So here's my thoughts. I feel like we often call for studies, and I feel like it's kind of the thing that we do to split the difference on issues that could go either way. And I often wonder whether it has any impact at all if we call for a study, truly. And versus calling for something in the capital, I think is a bit of a stronger statement about the importance that I do think this has for parents, whether it is based in statistical reality or whether it's perceptual. I almost don't know that it matters, because I think everything we're talking about now with parents and their perceptions of our public schools and what that means for enrollment and choices that they're making, I think that all matters. Right. So I think my preference would be to broaden the language, and maybe it's just improving school security and not putting in specifics like door locks, cameras, buzzer systems, and leaving it broad enough as to be interpreted more generally. Short of that, I mean, it certainly, I guess, should just be in the DNS, and then we can speak to it for Ira's point.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I think putting more school safety officers in is going to have a bigger impact. We were down at my middle school, we were down to 2 school safety officers last year. I don't know what we've got this year.
Ira, that's in here too. And
Okay.
that was in here last year.
Yeah.
And that one continues to be, I think,
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. And we're, by the way, the largest middle school in the district. But the reality of it is, if you average $100,000 over each school building in the city, which doesn't get you a great level of security, mind you, it just might begin to address the doors over 1,000 buildings. Do the math. It's a fair chunk of money to just do a gloss. So that's one of the problems when we're dealing with DOE buildings, is we're trying to produce a single standard across the entire city for all children. And I feel very uncomfortable saying it's just our children that deserve a greater standard of safety. I know it sounds unfair. I'm my own children, but that's what I
Well, but
believe.
I think in the conversations with CEC3, it's become very clear it's all or none. Like your hard mark, I mean, right? The conversation has been, part of the thing has been, you do it for all the schools or you do it for none. And so I think the reason why I don't feel like it's saying, oh, you just do it for our kids, is based on those conversations. It's very clear that if they're going to do it, they're going to do it for everybody.
Okay, but I would say that if you're doing that, remember, you're also, it'd be very hard to get out of this with the cameras and all this at $500,000 a building. So I'm just giving you an idea of what the dollars are. That's a very cheap estimate, I think, because
Mark and Bev.
So I still am concerned about this, but I understand Courtney's point about addressing a need that it seems current among parents. And after all, Ira and Courtney are the current parent. Oh, I guess Kristen, you're now current parent. Oh, good. So we actually have parents on this. So I defer. I maintain the concern, but I defer. I do think that taking out some of the specifics and saying improve school security, utilizing technology and other stuff that
or we could put the school security agents in this one just to make sure it's highlighted. It could be, kind of that broader.
The school safety agents is expense, not capital. That's all.
Yeah.
So if you make it a little more general and not calling specifically for door locks, I could live with that as and defer to the sentiments of those whose kids are actually at risk.
I mean, there's been a trend to trying to get rid of metal detectors wherever possible. Do I hear a cheer on that or not?
Yes, my daughter goes to, sorry if I can interject, a very hardened building on the MLK campus. It's terrible. Every child hates it in her school, all the administrators, all the teachers. It's exactly the opposite of a welcoming environment or a trusting of students type of environment. So hardening is not always good. In their case, it was really, really negative and has had a lot of backlash to it.
Beth?
Yeah, I have come to believe from this discussion that maybe we take out the capital piece and make a statement in the district needs around the physical buildings, but that if we, given the level of parent concerns, we pull out the safety agents as a separate item. Right now, it's buried along with other personnel needs, and just have it as a very, very strong standalone expense item that reflects increased parent concern following national events in buildings across the US. So I think that would give it its own kind of focus and attention in a way that's consistent with what we think might be reasonable.
Kristen, I know you'd had your hand up. Did you cover it with or did you have
Yeah, I felt badly that I interjected there. I wasn't totally clear on where Bev sees it. I think there should be something. I do understand that this is a big concern, but I am very cautious. Like I said, there's definite downsides to hardening buildings too much, right? And a lot of families in our community suffer from that, but they tend not to be the families who turn up at CEC3 meetings.
Fair. Fair. Okay. Roberta?
Yeah. So my granddaughter went to LaGuardia, and I would often drop her off and pick her up. And the police officers were there, and their job was to kick the kids off the campus and away from the street as quickly as possible. And when my children went to high school, and when I went to high school, you could hang out on campus, you could be with your friends, you could take your time leaving the campus, and you miss all that. And yes, the campus was across from Martin Luther King, and there were problems with Martin Luther King, but I think we have to be careful. But I also think that having this in the budget priorities, whether it's expense or capital, sends a message out to parents that we hear them and we understand that they have a need for this. So I think the wording needs to be careful, but I think it has to be either an expense or capital budget. I don't care which. You're the current parent. My granddaughters both are out of high school.
Just so we're also clear about the school safety agents, one of the conversations I had with a principal in our district last year who's in a co-sated school was that they only had one, they had multiple entrances. And if that one was out, then they had to pull teachers to be doing kind of drop off and dismissal. And it was really disruptive to the school. So this has the school safety agent, in addition to the safety piece, has kind of broader knock-on implications that I think are impactful for a school and a student body experience. So I do think the school safety agents are really important.
Some schools only have one door, but yeah, it is a problem. And after school, you're excited to see your friend that you hadn't seen since third period. In high.
Sorry, go ahead. So I don't think it's either or. I like Bev's idea of having a separate call out for school safety agents, maybe school safety agents plus crossing guards, since nobody.
It's actually down here already. We put it in last year because crossing guards, we had the same issue last year, which is that we had a shortage, which is a problem in and of itself. And a lot of it has to do with, honestly, what this is with providing funding, it's also this, it's the pay scale and it's everything, but it's the same thing when you don't have enough crossing guards. We had a couple of different spots that had real problems both last year and frankly, I wonder about what's going on this year. When you have not enough to begin with, and then you have one go out on vacation, now you have a really unsafe intersection.
Yeah, if I may, I understood Bev to suggest, and if she's not, I will, that it be unbundled from nurses is the point. That you have a separate one for school safety agents and crossing guards, and then a different one for nurses.
And social workers.
Okay, that works. Social workers and nurses for one, and I know we're not there yet, but what my only point is I don't see this expense item, which I endorse, as being in lieu of the hardware that you're talking about. And my view, which may seem schizophrenic from my first statement, is if we're going to do anything, why not go big? I'm not sure that I'm not certain that I'm 100% behind them actually doing this. But if you're doing this mostly to make a statement, then make a statement. Put it in the capital request. Phrase it so that it's flexible enough to meet the needs of all these different schools, which are inherently different from one from another. But go big.
Well, if you're going to do that, I think you should be smart enough also to break the request down into the piece that is actually the people hired through NYPD versus the people that are hired through DOE, so that you could actually quantify it. And then one of the interesting sides about that is it's my understanding, at least historically, that the crossing guards, in addition to being minimally compensated, also were drug tested. Which in 2022 is kind of ridiculous, since possession of a very popular substance is no longer an issue, and possessing it is as legal as tobacco or alcohol.
I agree, Ira, and it be separate from nurses and social workers because they're different hiring pools. And a lot of the crossing guards can't pass the test because of drugs, which is
Right,
called.
but if you get the word out that one of them should no longer be an issue, then we're probably making a lot of headway.
So one comment, sorry, we'll skip ahead and then we'll go back because now let's just deal with these. And you can, if you saw the document, you saw it in my comments. So nurses, additional funding for nurses was actually included in the mayor's executive budget this time. So again, I posed the question and didn't get a response as to what the situation in our district looks like. But I know it was an ongoing issue. And even, for example, previous years, even in a school that had a nurse, often that nurse was dealing with very strained time constraints.
All right, can we stay with capital for now, and then we'll get to the nurses on
Okay.
under expense.
Courtney, could we get back to, okay, we haven't finished this and we've gone on to a whole new area.
Sorry. Correct. So where did we net out on are we leaving school security as a capital item, or are we taking it out, relying on pulling out security guards and crossing guards on its own safety, and then ensuring that the language remains in the DNS? Kristen?
The parents should call that one.
Because I was sort of the dissenter, I want to clarify. I think it's fine to have it in the capital section, but just keep it very broad, because I definitely don't want to be like, we're asking for this specific technology, right? So the first half of that sentence where it says upgrade school facilities to improve school security might be sufficient.
I literally just deleted it in the screen share to exactly what you just said.
Okay,
Now,
good. We're on the same page.
What did you take out?
I took out the piece that specifically called out, for example, door locks, buzzers, cameras.
Okay.
Just leaving it broad.
Just so you know, for the when we put it into the DNS document, we're going to need backup and more material on this. So you're going to have to work on that for us.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Keep in mind, and again, I just read this the other day, that they had come out with the piece that they looked at security just in general and found a lot of violations, which they said were going to be fixed by day one. So I think the next question is also, did they even fix like broken locks? You know,
You can get us some language, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Just second what Courtney said. All of the systems that were put in, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, to adjust with the autistic child that had wandered off into the streets and later drowned. Most of those locks are no longer functioning. Either the batteries are no longer replaced, or the locks themselves were damaged. So what do you do with those? It's an easy fix. It's not a totally effective fix, but if you're running a program that is targeted at that population, you should have those in place and working, if nothing else. And that's a relatively quick fix. And in theory, it could be done by division school facilities if they wanted
But
to.
again, but I think to your point, which is a great one, and also, I think if we just leave it broad as upgrade school facilities to improve school security, I still think we're covered in there, and then we can check back with those specifics.
So just simply confirm. I don't know how to put the wording of it, but confirm operation, repair, and replace as necessary. Because those of us familiar with the city schools, maintenance is not a high priority.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it kindly.
Okay, are we?
Okay.
All right.
Next up was the last capital expense was upgrading the fire alarm system at the Library for Performing Arts to ensure the security of the building and its holdings.
And that we have as number 11. And we also have the technology equipment at Riverside Library. We did that rather than as expense item because they need the technology equipment.
Okay.
And we have that many we had more expense items than we had capital items. So we decided to put that as a capital item if you guys are okay with that.
Just going back to,
What did you say about Riverside, Roberta?
The Riverside Library, you had as one of your expense items, technology equipment at Riverside Library
The STEM programming.
to
Remember
provide
that?
funding for technology equipment for both children and adults to enable the library to provide STEM programs. And because we had many more items in expense, and we figured the equipment was going to cost a lot and we wanted good equipment, that we would put that in as technology equipment at Riverside Library and make it a capital expense if you guys are okay with that.
can we just step back for the performing arts? Fire alarm systems are primarily life safety systems, so I think we should just add life safety as a feature of the fire alarm.
Okay, I'm adding that.
That's usually a fairly compelling argument to get a fire alarm.
Okay, thank you. That is it.
Okay, are we on expense now?
I
We
believe-
are. All right.
Give me a minute to get my materials out. Okay, I'm ready.
So last year, it's not in here, but last year we had one that was about school funding, because we, at the time of writing, we were talking about fair student funding. This one in here, I think we should discuss because it's really complicated right now. Kristen and I sat on some phone calls early in the summer talking about this with the amount of that was the cuts to from the DOE for the school budgets, and the controversy that has ensued over what the New York City Comptroller says are federal stimulus funds that should be still available and that were held in reserve, and what should be done with that money, and does it really exist, and how much is it? And there's now a court case filing that has been kind of going on and off all summer. And so I think the big question for us as a committee is, what do we want to say, if anything, about school funding, given the changeability of this topic and the fact that we may have difficulty predicting to some degree what this is going to look like in 2 months, never mind a year or two. Mark, and then Kristen.
So I was about to offer my thoughts about whether or not this federal funding should be used for this purpose. In general, I do think so, but it just struck me that we're talking about fiscal year 24 in this document, not fiscal year 23.
Correct.
And am I incorrect in believing or thinking that I've heard that whatever this federal funding is, it's going to be gone by fiscal 24 anyway?
It has to be spent by 2024. That is when it expires. Yes.
So
When in 2024, because
Yeah.
23, when you say by 24, has to be spent in 23. That's the question.
well, fiscal 23 goes from June of 23 to June of 24.
for the city, and this is federal money, so it might very well be federal budget, which I think is what, October 1st to September 30th or something, or it's very inconveniently different. So is this a tempest in a teapot in that whatever we're talking about, it'll be either spent or not spent by then?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a DNS thing and not a budget priority per se,
Yes.
because we'll express our view if we come to consensus on one, we can express our view, but it'll be moot by the time the dollars come out. If that's correct, I'm asking, not telling.
I think that's correct, Mark.
Kristen?
Yeah, that it kind of gets to, because this is a changing field, maybe we can't identify where the money is coming from, because many people at the city had a hard time pinpointing exactly where the money is coming from. And as Mark said, because of the different calendars, the bucket that we thought we were looking at may
Yeah.
not be available by then. So what might be more valuable is towards the end of the expenses, I see you started to delineate in green like expense items, right? So it might be more useful, instead of saying it has to come from the federal COVID money, we just have to explain what we need money for.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why this one is in the horrible yellow orange color, because for discussion, but to me, this was not a done deal of staying in. So I think if the thought is let's take it out and just have the topic covered in the DNS so we can speak to it and keep our eye on it as a topic we may need to talk about in the future. I think my personal 2 cents would be that's fine, and frankly feels like a safer route.
Excellent.
Right.
Read.
And we'll discuss as we get down the list, the
Correct.
green ones, because there are some specific things
Correct.
that the schools
Correct.
definitely need money for.
Correct.
Good.
Okay. We all comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, Blanche. So this is the next one, which was 6, which was DYCG, that had summarizing after school programming, summer youth employment. So the latest that came in, I think, Blanche, and you're better positioned to speak to this, is just that our number one recommendation is to hold the funding steady. So I'm not sure it requires a specific budget request, but you can probably speak more thoroughly on this topic.
Courtney, we made that number 4.
Increase. Oh, you made it number. Okay.
Wait, but didn't we say that, didn't what came in is that we just needed to hold it steady, the funding levels?
No.
I know what
I
we had.
think we have been trying to say is that you have to show enough increase so purchasing power remains the same. In other words, you increase for inflation.
Can I read what we wrote? So increased funding for Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD, program sufficient to provide the purchasing power to cover increased costs for community programs, including summer rising, community-based centers, camps, and after-school program, parentheses, Cornerstone Beacons, SON NYC, Compass, summer youth employment program, Work, Grow, Learn, and other programs for youth.
If you that sounds great, Roberta. If you could throw the word baseline in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm thinking of baseline.
So increase baseline funding?
Yes.
Increase and baseline or something like that. The reason
baseline.
being that if it's not baseline, then it becomes a conversation every spring. Then the providers don't have enough time to hire and retain the staff they need to do what they need to do.
So is it increased baseline funding or is it?
It is increase and baseline. So they
baseline.
need to baseline the increase.
Both.
And baseline, okay. That's easy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because that timing issue has been problematic every year. Every year.
And I spoke with people,
Baseline is.
and that's one of their biggest concerns.
All right.
Now, Roberta, you said you made that 4?
That's number 4 on our master list.
Okay.
Because we think children have suffered the worst in the pandemic. Not that everybody else hasn't suffered, but we think.
Don't have to convince me.
Oh, I think you're speaking to a receptive audience on that topic. in this
If
committee.
somebody's not convinced, I can lend you some for a weekend.
Good, good. We're gonna need them.
Okay. The next one, which was 11 last year, was this funding for the ongoing training for those who work with students, social emotional training for teachers, principals, administrators, and any adults in contact with students.
We made that number 9. Now, that doesn't mean that it's during these are not gonna change, but we put that at number 9.
So I support this. I would leveraging what Christine told us in our, whatever it was, June meeting, or
June.
I think we ought to include both the word training and the word professional development, which is a little bit different. I know there's a later item about that.
Next, should we combine it?
Sure, we can combine it.
Mark, do you see right below it?
I do. So now, and I noted it when I was reading it. I confess, when I was reading it on the train, but I read it. And trying to make notes to the ever appreciation of my neighbors.
Mark, what are we getting? I'm sorry, I got a phone call. A professional training.
So we're talking through it right now, Roberta. So hang on one sec. So professional development is specifically to the professionals, the teachers and administrators in a building, and training is kind of everybody that works in the building that might interact with children. It does kind of feel like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Just different populations. So maybe you do combine them, but I still would like to call out training and professional development as separate items so that we don't only get one.
So I put professional development and training.
Does that work for you, Courtney?
Yeah, so we basically are taking out the one we used to have, keeping the language from the new and adding and training rather, here, hang on. Like
Wait.
this.
So I have provide Department of Education funding for ongoing training of those who work with students. So I'm adding training and professional development.
Professional development.
Here's,
Training, professional.
Hang on, Roberta. I think, Courtney, you're rewriting it, right? Because you have
well,
the
no,
green already.
Roberta's got the final version. We kind of have two. I'm going to send mine to Roberta. But
Oh,
I
okay.
think there's two pieces that are critical that I want to make sure Roberta is tracking on. One is that one of the things that Christine said was the need for it to be in person because it's been remote for so long, hard to make sure people were really getting what they needed to get, let's put it that way, out of the remote training. And so Christine specifically called out in person. And then I think the addendum that's kind of in that after the comma in the new version here, including training on differentiated learning from remedial instruction to accelerated learning, is also a piece that we added that I think wasn't reflected in last year's, and I think we want it to be.
So our label is going to be DOE in-person training, and I've added provide Department of Education in-person funding for ongoing in-person training.
And professional development.
Including training. Do you see what's in the green underneath? Including training on differentiated learning from remedial instruction to accelerated learning.
All right, well, you need to send that to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree, Courtney. That's really important.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think that's important. Yeah, and that's why I think the sentence that's on the document we're sharing is probably a little closer,
Agreed.
right? Because
So-
it has that final bit.
Yes,
So-
I have so here's the problem. I have the DOE training provide education funding for ongoing training at those who work with students, e.g. social emotional training for teachers, principals, administrators. And then at 16, I have in-person professional training, provide Department of Education funding for in-person professional development for teachers to address gaps from several years of reduced remote only training, including training of differential learning from remedial instruction to accelerated training. So are those two separate things?
You know, thank you, Roberta, because now I'm reading it the way you just read it, and I agree that they are separate.
Okay, so I need language for both.
I like what Courtney's got.
So Courtney, if you can send that to me tonight or in the morning.
Yeah, I'll send it.
So I have 9 DOE training in-person training, provide Department of Education for ongoing training. And then I have number 16, in-person professional training, provide Department of Education funding for in-person professional development for teachers to address gaps from several years. So there are two different items, but I just need different tags for them, because when we start doing our horse trading and steering, I need them to be differentiated.
Hang on, I want to make sure I'm understanding. Are we creating two different things?
What I had from what you had.
But this is a bigger question. Are we creating two different things, or are we combining into one?
One thing, you can combine them, I don't care. But if they're two separate things, I need separate language. So if you want to combine what I have is 16 and 9, that is perfectly fine with me. I'd be thrilled to do that. But right now, I have one that's called DOE in-person training and one that's called in-person professional training, and it's confusing.
So if I could, Courtney, if I could try to address that, what is on the screen right now is number 11.
Yeah.
The focus of that is social emotional learning. So that would be the tag there, Roberta, if I'm reading it correctly. And then the green new, which I think you said is what you had a number for it. The tag for that is professional development, in-person professional development. And I think that may give you the tag differentiation, and also help our colleagues on the board understand that these are not the same thing coming up twice. One has everything to do, that they're very different.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, and I don't think that you want to lump social emotional learning in with the academic rigor that is in the green. That's entirely the problem we're trying to solve, is the pressures of social emotional learning gaps on, and how that impacts the other part of the curriculum. So they need to be separate.
Big help, because when we're doing horse trading on Tuesday and at the full board meeting, I want people to understand the difference. So that is a major help. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to put in the learning under 11 as well? Social emotional learning?
Yes, I do.
Thank
That's
you.
It's not in mine, and instead of calling it DOE training, I'm calling it social emotional training. And under what I have is 16, it's going to be in-person professional development. Does that work, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sort of think in the first one, the word learning is important. So I would do social emotional learning training. Is that?
It's just social learning training, learning.
Okay.
I got it. Okay.
And Roberta, I'll send this to you after.
But everyone okay with that language? Because that's what I only want to have 3 or 4 words for the labels. So that, okay. Excellent.
All right, and now we are back to the funding for the medical, social, emotional health staff, funding for security guards, safety agents and crossing guards. So.
Wait, give me a minute.
You got crossing guards in both places. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, I was just saving the, it was attached to the comment that I wanted to remember when we got here, which is.
Oh, okay.
I have nurses and social workers and at public schools. Do I need a separate one for, I need a separate one for.
Well, I mean, so I think the argument here on what was on one of them would be this falling under the. I mean, we've got medical and social or emotional health support, and one is the school safety support staff.
Yeah, I think it's separate.
Yep.
Because nurses and social workers provide funding so that each school in CSD3 is a full-time social worker and nurse on staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important addition, Roberta, because the goal is to make sure there's one in every building. And
Right.
prior to COVID, that wasn't the case.
Right, no, I
Yeah,
know that.
that's an
And-
important, yeah.
I think a separate item has to be crossing guards you want them at every elementary school?
Well, the issue is that there's a general Kristen. I mean, the issue is there's a general shortage. So yes, and then keep in mind, for example, there was one that was up on around that 95th Street area where you could have one, which okay, you had a crossing guard, but you had, think about it, like one couldn't cover a whole dangerous intersection. So it's a numbers game as well, not just a representation per school.
No, at that
Yes,
school, you need somebody on 96th Street and somebody on 95th Street.
Right, but on even the corners, like each cross had a problem. Anyway,
Yeah, I
Kristen.
mean-
Yeah, I think
75
So-
plus 53.
So it's crossing guards at every elementary school, and you'll give me language to explain. This is just for steering. I don't need a lot of language, but for the DNS, I need a lot of language.
Maybe for every necessary intersection or something.
Yeah.
At crossing guards at each elementary school
Could I suggest add the phrase "at least," that you have at least one crossing guard for every school?
no, I think you need more at every.
Yeah, that's why I struggle with this, because even if you say we want one for every school, well, there's some schools where one is not enough. And so in some ways, part of the reason it was written broadly was because we may need to advocate for it differently at different schools.
So what was the
I
language?
agree. I think safety agents and crossing guards, there's not a hard number because each school has different needs. But to go back to the line before, for nurses and social workers, there is more of a hard number because there's been some organizing around that. And that was that every school, rather than every building, has a nurse and has a social worker. Because the city right now is being a little loose with that language.
Yeah.
They're saying every school has access to a social worker. That does not mean every school has a social worker.
So how do you feel with this crossing guards at every elementary school at every essential crossing?
That works.
Or if you have other language, I'm glad to put that language in, but I just need language for this, for when we do our horse trading at steering at the full board.
Yeah, that works. Every essential crossing, I think, is what Roberta said, and I like, that's as good as we're going to get in terms of trying to define this without a number.
Right.
Right.
And then for school safety agents. I mean,
The school safety agents depends on the building, right?
That's-
Like
that's what I was
co-located
saying.
buildings usually need more. Our buildings are different sizes and
Yeah.
shapes and all that stuff.
to provide adequate coverage, something for,
Yeah. Yeah, the problem is that they assign crossing guards, school safety agents based on incident reports or the frequency of incidents, not on the size of the school necessarily. I mean, there's a minimum, but, and that assumes that they have access to enough staff to do it, which they don't.
All right, I've added to provide adequate coverage at every essential crossing.
well, but
Uh,
school
could I
safety
just
agents is
add-
different.
Who will be providing the funding?
Well, that would be the police, I believe. It might be DOE and the police.
Because at some of these crossings, they are crossing more than students.
Yes.
they're crossing the public. And most of their time, a good bit of their time, is taken up with crossing the public, elderly people on walkers, mothers presumably in strollers, and the students are not getting the bulk of support from these crossing people. I can assure you of that. How we can express that, because
Well,
I think
But
they anticipate that because we
Mhm.
are correct. Safety agents and crossing guards are paid out of NYPD budget. That's why it's a separate line for the nurses and social workers who are part of the DOE budget.
but
correct.
I'm saying that the DOE people are crossing other than students.
You want to put that in?
I know,
That's
but
not
they're,
necessarily a bad
But
thing,
that
though.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not about who they're crossing. It's about their presence at the separate crossings near the school, knowing that kids
Okay.
are crossing.
Right, remember, they're only there a couple hours a day.
Right. They're there
And only
at
a couple of years.
drop off and dismissal. All right. So Roberta, we just need some sort of, if we have the crossing guards at every essential crossing, and school safety agents to provide sufficient coverage for each school, because I agree about Kristen, I agree it's different, but I think we can also say school rather than building.
we can, this language is just to get us through next Tuesday and
Right.
October 3rd. And once October 3rd is come and gone, we can change the language and improve the language. I just want, when we're voting on our district, our budget priorities and that we all understand what we're voting on.
That's great, Courtney. You're right to, in both cases, use school, not building.
Correct.
Perfect.
All right. Good.
Okay, where are we next?
We are at a sea of red. These are things that were all in last year that I think can probably be deleted.
Right.
Great.
One caveat on 18, we have no more snow days.
I know.
Courtney, we kept virtual learning infrastructure in place because we thought it might be ongoing. Do you want us to eliminate
I
that?
think we can take it out. They're doing a whole virtual academy. Kristen, keep me honest on this. They're doing a whole virtual, and that's still in flux, as I understand. But I don't think we need to be
All right,
shining a spotlight on it.
all right, we took that out.
You are right that that's in flux, but I will say we are aware that during the height of the pandemic, they were vested and had to provide the hardware to students for their homes and the access. Because the urgency has faded, I'm not confident, like they're not sending laptops home now, right? They're not ensuring that everyone has access to internet. And as Ira pointed out, that if they're going to require kids to log in on this one fluke day a year, that they might get a snow day, suddenly they're on the hook for all of that again.
Well, hold it. The teachers may drive the snow days. Because now the kids in theory can get to school every day of the year. It's the teachers that can't.
So, Kristen, would you leave that in or would you take it out?
Well, wait, could it just be wait? So Kristen, in that case, we still have the Wi-Fi and the DNS for kids. Couldn't we just put language in the DNS that we need to maintain the ability to provide students with access to remote learning, e.g. laptops, and ensuring Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that works. So it doesn't have to be a line item in the budget priorities
We'll put
because
it-
it's a little vague, but
Yeah.
so long as it's in the DNS.
Yeah. By the way, as an aside, remember Chromebooks have a die by date, and Windows 10 has a similar date established. So you have to keep your eye on maintaining software capable of operating on a continuing basis. I think for the most part, most of those dates are anywhere from 3 to 5 years off.
I think, and I think the point is something broad in the DNS that's like, keep your eye on the ball because we could need this again. Maybe as soon as the next snow day, but we can't, we don't want to go, we want to ensure that they are staying on top of it rather than letting it go and then having to go to 0 to 60 again.
Yeah.
For the fiscal year 2025.
Say it
You can
again?
only add it for the next fiscal year.
Okay.
The next thing we have on our list is computer science for all.
Huh?
This was a mutate.
Yeah, I
think-
don't know where it came from. Who's calling for computer science for all?
Well, the DOE is, however, they have been falling very, very short of that goal.
Wasn't that Mayor de Blasio?
Yeah, but it was also still showing up on their website as a commitment. And they're going to roll it out over years, but they've been very, very minimally efficient at doing so, and they're way behind their schedule. And I guess I'm probably the guilty party here because my my son taught computer science in a school in the city. But it's something that if they're really pushing this notion of preparing kids for careers, it's particularly sad that they aren't even able to keep to their own schedule on this. And it seemed to me, just knowing the way schools are budgeted, right? The rest of the STEM programming in schools flows through the school's allocation, and they make available whichever teachers they want, and they fund out of that their STEM programming. But computer science has particular requirements that don't flow through the allocation structure at all, and that's needed as separate money and separate effort to recruit. So that's sort of what I was thinking about. But if the committee is not there, then the committee's not there.
Yeah, I'm like the doubter on everything. I think it's part of the whole for all package, right? So there's algebra for all, there's AP, they're like four for alls. They're fine. I actually think the algebra one's getting a lot of attention because there's a lot they can build out with that. They're also now focusing more on reading. So I just don't see the need to call out a program that like exists and is kind of rolling through its thing.
Okay.
We'll remove it.
What are we saying?
Well, we still have this next one. This was from last year too. The funding to support the expansion of our district's educational programs such as U3K, dual language enrichment programs, and ELL support. This is from last year.
It's sort of like a potpourri of unconnected items.
The catch-all for sure. I think this was something I remember last year when we were combining willy-nilly. I think this was one of those where we put a couple of different things in one place.
Well, actually, if you take out the
Yeah.
U3K, then it does seem to tie together with language access, both as enrichment and as remediation. So maybe and U3K is its own thing anyway. Maybe that's the edit, and then you keep it. What do you think?
We don't have it in our budget.
But we're going to be taking out the computer science piece.
But someone explain it to me.
Explain what, Roberta.
what it is.
So this one was in last year, and it had kind of all of it was the expansion of a number of different programs, all of
It's
which
for 19.
So Mark's suggestion is to drop the U3K and do it as language enrichment programs.
Funding for-
It's enrichment, it's language access programming,
Language access, yeah.
which is both enrichment and remediation, depending on who you are and which program it is.
I would just do the short label then as language access programming,
Sounds right to me.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Should we, in addition, reference populations such as the refugees?
I was just about to say, this feels right up kind of the point that that Ira was making at the very beginning, which is one can imagine this becoming even more necessary.
Yep.
So funding support language area programming.
Access programming.
Access.
Sorry. Language enrich. Okay, so that's good. So I've
And,
added,
and we can flesh out some language at a later point that
right.
ties in the refugee issue.
And you can either not use or not use the word DeSantis at your will.
Okay, all right, and then we have a few new ones here. One of the pieces that I think was, when I look back at what we did last year, the part that I kicked myself over was
Hey, before you get there, we have library staffing, provide additional funding for staffing at the 3 libraries to increase program for children and teens who have been adversely impacted by the pandemic and expand adult services.
Oh, is that from that library piece? The
Yes.
library document? Okay.
And then you continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. That's fine. Okay. I'm just putting a placeholder in for that. You and I can talk, you can show me what language you have later.
Later, okay.
Okay, and then these last 3 pieces, if you recall from our meeting, I think it was January, talking about what are the needs in terms of serving our students with special needs. These three are drawn from that resolution, almost directly, verbatim. So funding to support the programs and specialists needed to provide services with students with special needs, including in-school and after-school programming. This piece actually came from Christine too. And then the funding to bring the special education teachers and service providers at CBOs in line with those employed directly by the DOE. That's the pay parity piece. And then the funding to enable the hiring and training of the staff focused on the CBO housed UPK and 3K populations to assist with timely special education referrals.
Courtney?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure the middle one has been accomplished. I'm pretty sure that we were asking for, I believe the language was contract enhancement or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm
You
pretty sure
got
that
it?
happened. I think that happened. So
That's one I love to delete.
Courtney, so what we have is 22 is pre-K staff and training, provide funds to hire and train staff at UPK and pre-K, programs to run by community-based organizations to enable the staff to make timely referrals for children with special educational needs.
Mhm.
And 23 is funding for special education teachers and CBOs, provide funds for special education teachers and services providers working for community-based organizations at parity with those employed directly by NYC Department of Education.
yeah, it's the latter one that I think has now been accomplished. Max should be able to confirm that.
So 23.
The pay parity one may have been accomplished, so that one may be able to be deleted.
And then the fourth, the one after that would be funding to support language access program for refugees.
No.
No, that's going under what is up here is 19,
Right.
which we've labeled language access programming, but wherever we put it in the master list may vary, right?
But the
Right.
important one not to
Right.
lose here
I don't want
is
to,
the special ed one.
what's the special ed one?
The funding to support programs and specialists needed to provide services for students with special needs, including in-school and after-school programming.
And by the way, guys, when
Wait, where is that?
it's up on the screen right now.
We made,
Language-
we made,
language- That number
Go ahead.
9,
This one. I just
Funding-
highlighted it.
funding to support. Can you read it to me?
Sure. Funding to support the programs and specialists needed to provide services for students with special needs, including in-school and after-school programming.
And you're gonna send that to me tomorrow.
And I'm going to send this to you. And you and I can talk, Roberta, tomorrow morning if you want to talk through all
Oh, yeah.
this. I will also tell you that I sat on the town hall with the new superintendent on, what day was it? Monday?
Right.
And this question about access to resources in our district specifically came up for the parents who are in the schools, kids with IEPs, difficulty getting resources in the schools and being told, listen, it's a citywide problem and our district is better off than most, and the parents, there were a lot of questions on this. So
There are a lot
I
of-
think
Courtney,
it's critical we have this in, and
The
I'd
one-
advocate for it being relatively high.
the one question I have here is this a money problem or is this a hiring problem?
Yeah.
It's both, because one option the DOE has is to pay for people to go to private services, right? Which they're also being slow and resilient to doing.
Yeah,
So it's both. But I also do think we see far more need for this than language access. Not that language access isn't a thing, but it's not nearly as prevalent as the lack of services for students with disabilities.
I'll just say it again. I would like to see this go high.
okay.
It should go high.
Yeah.
I had a special needs grandchild who got nothing.
Well, and by the way, if our kids were hardest hit during the pandemic, and then these kids in this group were the hardest hit of the hardest hit. So.
Right. And my granddaughter had to go to Canada to get excellent schooling.
And I think that's it on our list, guys.
So Courtney, if you can call me in the morning
Yeah.
and go over all this, because I think I missed a few things.
Yeah.
And I'd like to make sure it's in the, what's in the budget priorities and what's in the district needs. So just so we are clear on that.
Got it.
Excellent. Thumbs up.
All right. We did it.
Thanks, everybody. This is a big help for us.
Yeah,
And thank you for our patience, because I know we were
You are
delinquent.
not the last.
very-
Rory.
You
delinquent, but very
I-
thorough.
guys get an F,
Were we the last in?
but you get an F for doing it late, but you get an A for being really good and helpful. So maybe next year you'll get an AA.
Next year we'll really try and make it our June meeting. And but I don't know that we're gonna have, anyway, whatever,
No,
different topic.
It's what it is. We love you.
Well, a part of the problem, Roberta, is we deal with a number of stakeholders, as I said earlier, and they're gathering information for themselves,
Yeah.
thinking of the library people.
Yep.
And their deadlines are not the same as ours.
Well, we know that. We love you, but I spent every day this week working on this and making changes, and
Sorry.
Beverly was helping me with this, and it was like,
Sorry.
we love
Sorry.
you.
Sorry.
I think you're great. We love you. Bye-bye.
All right. So Blanche, do we want to do new business? I think, which is mostly just topics that we want to cover in future months.
Sure.
So I know that we really do want to talk about DYCD and
We are
you.
hoping to get the DYCC head Betancourt in on for our October meeting. And there was somebody else we were the library people seemed quite happy to come and speak with us. Meaning the downtown, the director of community and governmental affairs said she would be quite happy to come and meet with us with the appropriate staff. So those are the two that are in the offing.
Anybody else have any requests? Yes, Bev.
Yeah, for DOE representation, we automatically think Community School District 3. However, Community School District 3 has no jurisdiction over the high schools in our district. I would love to see us develop a relationship and representation, perhaps at one of our meetings, from somebody from the Manhattan High School Superintendency, because I don't think we are necessarily as tuned in there and as aware of unique high school issues and needs. So I think it would be helpful.
Great idea. Kristen.
I just want to thank Bev because with a District 3 high school student, I love that idea. I think it's really good because they are overlooked. And I haven't fleshed this out in my head, but I would like something that focuses on special education, not separate from the high school thing, as a separate meeting, because it's just has a terrible track record right now in the past couple of years and keeps falling through the cracks. I'm not totally sure in my head who could come speak to that. Like certainly advocates for children will often come out to speak, but I was wondering if we can think a little bit about who can give us a sense of what's going on the ground in District 3.
I love that idea. So when we did the meeting in January, I joined, there's a Facebook group with parents, and I joined and actually posted earlier this week asking for people who are willing to talk to help guide kind of our thinking on this. So I think, I think it'd be helpful to also, I was really in listening into the superintendent's town hall, I really was struck by, I think some of this is also hearing from parents firsthand of what are the challenges, what's going on, what are the experiences, as well as on the other side of what does this look like and what are the needs. Anyway, we can keep mulling on that, but I agree, Kristen. I think this is a really critical piece to get our arms around and understand what we should be advocating for.
Kristen, I just would mention to you, I don't think we're on the committee at the time. We've had advocates for children on 2 separate occasions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'd be happy to come. I don't know about happy, but they would be more than willing to come again.
Yep.
Yep.
Now, they do a number of things, as you know. Is there anything in particular that you would want them to zero in on?
As Courtney kind of picked up, I was saying we could have advocates for children, like they're great, but they don't necessarily reflect what's happening in District 3. So I think we need to think a little bit about who can speak to kind of local issues around special ed,
Okay.
and then maybe what we'd like advocates for children to speak to.
Yeah, my issue, I mean, when they came on, they're wonderful, they're great. It's great. But remember, we asked them specifically, can you help drill down into our district? And we've never sort of gotten that answer from them. And I wonder if this is, to me, this is also really making sure we go to the source and understand. I was, again, just really struck by the parent who said, when we ask for help on this, we're told you should be happy with what we have because our district has a lot compared to other districts, which is fine and true, but you're still a parent with a child with needs and you're being told, don't ask for more, which just as a parent, anyway, I think it'd be, I think we need to hear from the parents as well and principals. And, you know, I mean, I think this is something where we kind of probably want stakeholders from a couple different positions around the table, frankly.
Okay, any other ideas? Well, everybody is happy. With what we're thinking of. Okay,
Well, that's all I have on my list, other than everybody get ready for full board and the horse trading.
well, that's steering, isn't it? Roberta?
Both, it's both.
Both. It's still, I mean, it's
It
just,
starts steering and it keeps going.
I don't remember.
Do we have a public hearing scheduled for that, or is steering gonna stand in for the public hearing?
I don't know.
We are obligated to we're obligated to call something the public hearing. It doesn't, in my view, it doesn't need to be any different than any other meeting, but it needs to be on the calendar and noticed in that way.
I'm not sure if Max is actively listening right now, but we can flag that for him.
Yeah, we've talked about it in the committee from time to time, but I'm not sure how but I don't think we've talked about it since the July and August meetings got canceled. And
Sure.
we were kind of backed up against that. Anyway,
Okay.
not your
Great.
problem, Courtney.
Well,
All
All right, are we signing off?
I think that's it. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, great job.
Okay.
Thank you to both co-chairs.
Thank you,
Oh,
guys.
hey, I have some comments on the the narrative, which I only got a couple days ago. Can I send them to somebody?
You mean the DNS?
Yeah, the language changes.
Yeah.
Can I? Yeah, okay. I'll put them into some kind of usable form.
Yeah.
Take or leave,
Okay.
but mostly to prove I actually read it.
Thank you for reading it. Thank you for reading it, especially on the train, Mark.
I have a few too. I'll send them to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. And good night.
Good night.